Hello, Armin. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I'm Giovanni. I'm currently working at Sentry as a site reliability engineer, but let's say I kind of worked a lot with Python and web development, some stuff like that. And yeah, I kind of contributed to open source. Like, I think I started like 15 years ago with Web to Py, like the web framework from Massimo Di Piero. So yeah, that's kind of me, I guess. I'm actually a physicist, so I might have some weird opinions sometimes on software and the industry. But yeah, I guess that's part of me being me.
Yeah, so we had a discussion, when was it? Like almost 2 weeks ago, I think, briefly in a coffee place on AI,
Mm-hmm.
big programming. And I think like maybe I feel like there were two themes we discussed. One was the impact that it has on open source and sort of the what it could be versus what it is today. I think this
Mm-hmm.
is like probably I think the main things. So one of the weird things at the moment is that I obviously use agentic coding a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, obviously, I know that there are a lot of people who are having a completely opposite opinion to that. I started going into like, why is that? And I think that at least my realization at the moment is that it actually takes quite a bit of time and effort to learn, which is ironic because it sort of feels like it shouldn't. But I feel like there's, in a weird way, there's a little bit of a skill to it. So one of the things that I did recently, for instance, was I built this. I mean, I built a lot of stuff for the company, but one I open source, which is this queue thing, like a durable
Absurd.
execution system. Absurd, yeah. And the reason I even was willing to build it in a way was because I am from a purely philosophical software engineering philosophical point of view. I believe in two things very strongly: as little dependencies as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and for system to crash really well and recover. Like it should be like the stability should come from, like, it doesn't matter how it sort of terminates itself, like it should come back to it in a way. And so durable execution for me is an interesting thing, but I also didn't want to combine 20 different sort of startup-y kind of solutions out there together, and I felt like it should be easier to do. And the
Mm-hmm.
point is that I was able to do this with Claude and Codex rather efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and otherwise, I probably might not have built it at this stage of the company
Mm-hmm.
because it is sort of a side quest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my recent lessons of, like, you can actually kind of build open source software with it, and I actually feel kind of good about the quality that it has. And I feel like there's more leverage of me to maybe not over engineer things quite as bad because I can do it with just the agent.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's a little bit of a sort of a pushback against sort of the madness that was maybe at least the last 10 years of software engineering that happens in a lot of companies, which is like all of a sudden it's like an army of third party services that you don't really understand. So
Mm-hmm.
what's your take on that?
So I think like I have a lot of point of views on these, like, and in general, like about AI for coding, I guess. Like, I think I had like a draft for a blog post, like sitting there like couple of years, and once in a while, like I try to add stuff there and never publish it. But anyways, I digress. I think it really depends on the context, right? Like in which you operate, because like I guess we are like on the opposite sides of things, like regarding almost everything. Like on the work side of things, right? Like I work for a company, like an established company. You're like starting with something new as a startup. I did a bunch of startup in the past, but like yeah, it was 15 years ago, so like there was no AI stuff too. So I don't know, like if at the time, if I had the chance, I would use something like that. But specifically like for open source, I think it depends. Like first of all, like I'd say in the last 10 years, like even in a community like the Python one, which I'd say it's like it has like a slow pace compared to something like JavaScript or stuff like that. I'd say things that have changed quite a lot, in terms of even just like in terms of the amount of libraries out there that you can, just put it in as a dependency. So I'd say like the amount of code and projects out there, it grew a lot, and like the quality of those projects, like it's very different, right? Like we have some like really long standing projects, which are, I'm not saying like they're good quality, like by definition. We have a plenty of new stuff. Like some of that is good, some of that is bad. But the role like of agentic coding for managing an open source like project to me is weird because I guess like my main concern when I work on one of my open source project is like the long term maintenance. Like I rarely put somewhere like out there and just never care about it anymore. Like I'm not really into like source available rather than open source, right? Like there's very few stuff that I don't touch anymore, like after I put them available for the people to use. So yeah, to my perspective, like in your specific case, like I see how it works because it's something like very self-contained, quite small in terms of features or scope or stuff like that. But yeah, I guess like my question for you would be what how that project looks like at like in 2 years. Like, do you care at all? Like
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I first of all, I think you're right that there's a lot more open source code now, and I actually always found that to be a problem. It's not that I love curl as an example. I think there's a lot of stuff wrong with curl, but what I love about curl is that it commits itself to very long term stability. To it's sort of like a rock in the shore, if we call it this way, I guess. It's just there. It's going to run everywhere. It doesn't change. It's a very reliable piece of software. It has its weird behaviors, and I have learned a lot of them over the years. But it's there. It works, and it means that a lot of improvements can land in one piece of infrastructure that many of us are using. Same with SQLite and many other projects. There's a completely different vibe than, for instance, if you take the reason why a lot of not bifurcation, like a lot of what do you call this? But there's so many more projects sprawling in the JavaScript ecosystem. And I think the reason here is actually less that people are combining efforts together and more it's like, hey, I also want to build an open source project. Like see the
mhm,
act of creating it and not the act of maintaining it. The maintaining part is the hard one. The creating it is the easy one. Yeah, I think that because maintaining is hard, there's a question like how well does that work? I think in general, my theory is because AI makes writing new code much easier, that code should not be open source most of the time. It should be whatever you need for your code base. And then maybe the entire code base goes public. I don't know. But we don't need more open source libraries. We need less.
mhm,
We need more consolidation. We need more people working together to solve problems, not 20 different JavaScript front end frameworks or whatever.
mhm,
But I actually think that if you want to maintain things, if you really want to commit yourself to maintenance, then AI will actually help a lot. Because you can, if you want, because the thing is like you need to commit yourself to maintenance. What does it mean? There's a lot of stuff that comes with it, some of which are really crappy, like writing change logs or finding repo cases. This is one of my most favorite things that AI can do is this weird description of a problem that someone might have run into. And like,
mhm.
Claude, make me a repro case. And it's like I hate doing that, but it can do that. Right? So I think it depends. How do you wield the sword? So I don't think it's like I think that would be a different thing if you sort of say like, hey, the way I'm going to maintain my libraries, I'm just going to AI slop commit everything. Right? There will be a way of doing that, but I don't think it's going to be one that has like a lot of users at the end of the day. I don't know. I think it's complicated.
Yeah, but to that point, like my take would be like from my experience, and again, like maybe that also depend on the scale of the project, like in terms of popularity of the projects I maintain. But like even at the scale I am, I rarely find the act of producing code for my open source project like the hard part of the maintenance. Like to me, like the major of burden comes from like issues management or release schedule
Something
or
that Claude is capable of assisting with. No, I think you're right, but I give you those two examples. But I think like I feel like I'm quite fast at writing code, and yet I very rarely write code now. I mostly sort of delegate to agent. And one of the reasons why I actually found this to be so, for instance, so it's a good example. If I would have written it by hand all the
Mhm.
time, everything of it, I wouldn't have built it like I did because I hate SQL. I really do. It's not my favorite language.
Most of the
So
people.
I would have erred on the side of just writing most of it in Python, writing a Python SDK, and then doing the least amount of SQL necessary. But actually, that's precisely what I didn't want to do. I knew that the right way of doing this is the same way as PGMQ does it, which is you write a bunch of stored functions because then you do everything in the database, and the SDKs are very, very tiny. And so now I can have a Go SDK, a Python SDK, and a JavaScript SDK. But I would not have enjoyed writing that because it would have involved writing one of my least favorite programming languages. It's good for queries, but the moment you do more complicated stuff with it, it's not enjoyable. And so it, I think it changes a little bit the perspective of how you do things, because all of a sudden I don't quite mind as much anymore doing the things that I always knew were right to do, but it's just not enjoyable. I had this thing also recently where I basically had this small little utility script, which one of the quote unquote requirements that I made myself was that it should work on Linux and Mac. Um, and it just didn't. It just didn't, right? And it became so annoying to maintain because it's like it basically depends on like different parameters to set and stuff like this. I just went to Claude and said like, look, let's just rewrite this in Perl. It's not that I like Perl, but it runs everywhere and it's very good with regular expressions, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that you can throw on any machine, and you don't have to deal with like dependencies. And for what it was doing, which is basically just parsing a little bit of stuff in a build step, it's perfect, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess maybe I'm just lucky. Like the amount of things. Like if I think about like in general my, I don't know, daily life in programming, like both on the work side of things, like both on open source things, like the amount of actually boring stuff or things that annoys me, it's very little. Like in general, right? Like I don't know, like probably most of the people find annoying to write bash scripts, but I learned that like I don't know ages ago. So like I don't know, I'm just like it's hard for me to do that step, right? Like where I see a problem and maybe like yes, I don't like bash, but maybe I need to write like I don't know those 10 lines of bash. Like it's hard for me to do the switch and say instead of just typing, like switch the context, right? And say,
Well,
oh, okay,
I
let's
felt
ask.
the same at one point, and now I'm like, it has switched in my head somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I,
Look,
I,
I have a sort of different version of this, which is like for many years I was sort of in my mind I had this idea that I will not drive an automatic car. It's just it was like I will only ever buy stick shift cars.
mm,
But at one point I was like, this just doesn't make a ton of sense to me because I really like what's it called? Adaptive cruise control, which
mm,
works much better if it can
mm.
go to zero and you don't have to shift like a maniac. So it was sort of this. I had to open myself up to the idea that I was just like, there's a car for fun, and then there's a car that just has to get me through the day, and that works better for an automatic. And I feel like maybe sort of I had made the same shift in my mind at one point about like the act of like punching it into the keyboard is it is stimulating, but it's not necessarily
Yeah,
the important one.
yes, it's definitely not the important one. Like I spent a lot of time thinking before actually typing, but I guess like if I have to put like on like the balance, right? Like the thing to say, okay, now I've done all of my thought process, which I will do like in any case. Like to me, it's very hard to delegate the thinking to whatever LLM like exists out there. Like at least for now, mostly because of the lack of predictability in the output. Like it's very hard for me to delegate like the thinking to something like which is not really repeatable. Like on the same input can give me like 10 different answers. And
Do you
so
still find that to be a problem now that it's very unpredictable?
I'd say like again, like in general, no, but talking about software, like it's not the way I approach software, right? Like it's not like my way in general of architecting something is not like there are 100 possible ways of doing this. Like my general approach is probably there are like two, three correct ways of doing this, and I need to pick the optimal one for my use case or context. Like, of course, there are like probably 100 ways to do the same shit, but like realistically speaking, like probably three out of those 100 are worth investigating. And the point is like if I don't have, if I cannot like reproduce like those three ways like with a certain amount of certainty. Sorry for yeah. I find it very hard to like leave the control to that, right? Like,
I guess like for me, I think I understand this. To me, like mentally, I never feel like I don't have the control in a way. And this is actually a little bit weird because like
mhm,
very clearly I let it do really crazy stuff, right? Like it connects to my production system and checks the
yeah,
database and stuff like this, right?
yeah. I will never do that.
Well, I'm very close to my escape button if it does something stupid. But like ignoring those sort of like more extreme versions of it, it runs tests, it writes code, it does some stuff, but at the end, it presents me with a diff.
Hmm.
And so it is me that commits, it is me that reviews, it
Yeah,
is
that's
me
for
that
sure.
sort of
That's for sure.
interacts with it, right? So I don't feel like my agency is not there.
Hmm.
I can sort of fall down into a path where I'm like this is like a sort of a pure slop project where I don't really care. Absurd has like the main SQL part and the driver, which is really good, I think. But then it has this UI which is called Habitat, which I just wanted to see my tasks, and
Hey,
like I
that's fine.
didn't care. This is pure
That's
slop.
fine.
But I would have not written the UI in the first place before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so
But you
I
still
feel
didn't.
like
Like that didn't change. Like something else. Like instead of someone else,
yeah,
like something
but
else
the thing
did.
is that now I have the UI, and
Yes.
I feel really happy about it because I can like look. I run this on one of my agents, and basically like every single step that it does, I can now click through. I can see it, and it even does some nice things. For like if I click on a string, it sort of changes from JSON rendering with like the escapes to like inline. It's much easier to debug. It gives me pure joy using this UI and debugging my shit better. That if I didn't have the agent at this point, I wouldn't have committed myself to doing it. So I think it changes the calculus in a way. And because you mentioned earlier, like, is it different for an open source project or some new startup as another company? I think there are certain projects that you run into at the company where the actual hard part is not writing the code. In fact, it is very possible that you have a monumental task where the actual only change is one configuration parameter. And what actually is really hard is validating that it doesn't break, right? So you often create these crazy harnesses around it to validate that what you're changing right now actually is going to work. Or you're creating this massive migration strategy,
Mhm.
right? And I think what AI helps with now is helping you create the tools to then do those changes in a way. Because a lot of these tools are like throwaway anyways. You're going to need them for like a week or maybe 90 days or however long it takes you to run the migration. And then afterwards they're like just dev null, delete it. So I feel like there's like even for
I think that can work in a very small company. I don't know, 10 to 50 people, I'd say. Like, but for me, like, it's harder to imagine, even if I like, I don't know, like, I picture like building a company today, right? Like, and scaling that company to 500 people. Not necessarily all of them working on code, of course, but let's say like, I don't know, half of them, whatever, 250 people working on code. And like, even if I can picture like working with AI, especially for that kind of thing you mentioned, might work like really good, like in the first, I don't know, year. I think like the major time consuming activity in big companies is doesn't have anything to do with the code. But even like
I think that's right. Like,
thinking about features, like
but
it's
I don't think
most
the AI
about
makes it
discussions.
harder.
No, it's just makes cheaper to make experiment as soon as those experiments are self-contained enough. But again, like if you're talking about a big company, it's the same.
But let's
Like,
take a Sentry for instance, right? I used to work there.
mhm,
One of my least favorite tools, I appreciate that it exists, but I absolutely hated interacting with was the Snuba admin. Because
never had the chance to interact with it, but I heard a lot of stuff. Yeah.
it's not because this tool was badly built or something like this, but it was built with about as much time as you have in addition to all the other shit that you have to do.
Hmm.
But then everybody else has to use this tool, right? And so if we were to take like the very sort of simplistic view of it, it's like what's the quality of that tool, and what
Hmm.
would what would be the quality of that tool if it was written with AI? Now I'm not going to
Hmm.
judge if it's going to better or worse. That's my point. My point is that it actually took a really long time to write the tool too, right? Because
Hmm.
reasons you need to deploy it and then you can maintain it and then there are going to be all the people that are going to complain about all the stuff that it
Hmm.
doesn't do, and then someone else is going to throw some stuff into it, and so I from my recollection of actually even trying to look at the source of this thing, it wasn't amazing.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
wasn't built to be amazing.
yeah. Of course.
So these tools exist if you want them or not. A lot of the
Yes,
stuff within companies exists that is this internal thing.
yes, but I think like it's a very tiny portion, like on big companies, right? Like,
Maybe, but it is still in my mind. All of these tools in my mind are what all my frustration is in a way.
okay.
It's not like it's not that curl or it's not the Linux kernel or it's not these things that are actually built for purpose
Mm-hmm.
and and they're really really rock solid pieces of software engineering.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the other shit because like that's the one that you run into, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
only way for me to debug an issue is to go through Snowball.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to pick on this thing, but it's like this is like there was a significant part of my day in every once in a while I was going there and running queries, and it was just never great. And then I
Yeah.
could look at like here's this other tool I could use where like actual people put ridiculous amount of effort into compared to the internal tooling that we built, and it was better. Right? And I can tell you objectively, my internal debugging tools now are better.
Yes.
But and built with a fraction of the time. And I think that problem will not necessarily scale any worse to a large company.
No, I completely agree. My point was like I think like the amount of time spent on those tools, like on a bit like once the company like becomes bigger and bigger is less and less relevant in a way. Like I don't see like the majority of discussion in happening in Sentry like during meetings about snow admin. Like it's just it's there. So like so yeah, to me like that's the kind of the barrier in between, like I totally agree, like every company out there could use like any coding, like AI coding tool to build like UIs over stuff, or yeah, again, like internal tools for making queries or checking whatever the state it is. My point is like talking about real software,
Okay,
like
but
real
I guess here's a
software.
question: how good would AI have to be? Like, like how would it have to work so do you actually think it would work for real software?
Like
Like, what's
from my perspective, like again, like the main point for me would be to have something that is predictable. Like the predictability to me, like is the like probably like the reason number one. Like I really find really hard like working with AI in general.
and it's predictability in the code that it generates, or it's predictability in being able to tell ahead of time if it's going to be able to do this task or not, or a combination of thereof. Like, in which part I think do you find it most unpredictable?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same, right? Because like if you have to reroll 10 times, right? And five, like, and even if like five out of those 10 times is decent and it produces something I can like work on, right? Like patch and
For me, it's
adapt.
different because if I
It's
feel
like
like there's
flipping a
like
coin.
yes, but if I can know ahead of time
Mm-hmm.
if the coin flip, like basically, let's say this is in fact a randomized thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it would work a little bit like a role play game. And I was like, this is a, I don't know, this is a task that requires throwing 3d6 or something. Versus this is one that requires, I don't know, one and everything over two sort of is success. Like you have ahead of time, you have an indication of is it going to be a problem worth throwing the AI to or not, right? And I think that the reason why I feel like I feel a little bit more confident about AI now is that I have a better understanding, at least for the models that I'm using, which problems are problems that the AI at least is going to make some progress versus which are the problems where I don't even have to try because it will not go anywhere or the output is going to be too random. So that to me is a different thing because it gives me the opportunity to sort of opt out of it
Mm-hmm.
before even wasting like coin tosses in that sense.
I'd say like probably okay, a few things here. Like I guess like if some condition were different, like about the current state of, AI, things like if the media exposure was less, if the pace of everything was like slower in terms of investment, in terms of Twitter discussions, in terms of like in terms of a lot of company like pushing hard on these kind of things, and the fact that there are practically speaking like two companies doing the vast majority of the hard lifting here, AI Anthropic. Like, I'd say if all those conditions were different, right? Like if we were in a condition in which like I had like first of all more open weights models or um open source stuff in terms of LLMs, like I don't know, like train, like how to do training. Yes, I can read papers, but like papers that don't tell the whole story, right?
I think what's interesting about this is if we go with this open point for a second, we actually do have, at least from pure perspective of like how it works. I'm not going to say it's easy to train a model, but it's actually not really all that hard. What is actually really hard is to source all the data, particularly to source it in a way that's actually at the end of the day ethically correct. And
But at least
I
I
think
had the
that
chance, right? Like to my point, like I don't want, like in general, if the AI model I could use, like if the LLM I could use was not trained on like all the JavaScript code which is in GitHub nowadays, which I would say like even when they started, like even before the AI is law, like the quality wasn't good, right? Like in average, like on average, like wasn't good. Like I don't want something like that. Like I would rather prefer like to invest time into sourcing out my own source of learning. Like yes, it would require me a bunch of time to do that and probably like produce like something more close to what I would like to see AI spitting out.
I think probably like you might not produce enough corpus data yourself to be able to run an LLM just on your own code, right?
Yeah, no, no, no.
But I feel
I'm
like
not
you
saying
could.
like just my code, but like I kind of have like a few ideas on which code like I didn't wrote like to train an AI.
But yeah, I think like you could actually probably get away with like a well-selected set of open
Hmm.
source, particularly if people sort of opt into. I don't think you need necessarily all of GitHub and all of the terrible influencer blog posts with little code snippets that don't really do much. I think like we're not going to get rid of AI. So I think it's here to stay. And I actually do think it's a little bit like a steam engine in the sense that the basic idea of what a transformer looks like is simple enough that people will always be able to reproduce it. So then there's just a question of data. Seemingly, data will be easy to get. Good quality data, maybe less so. I don't know. But you can even run to one of the existing models and just use it as a teacher model and sort of generate more slop out of it. And you're going to get a model that's at least sufficiently decent. If it tumbled 5 times, then open weights, who knows?
So I'd
But the
say
crazy thing is, if you do actually do that, like if you produce from one model to another and you do it a couple of times, the first few iterations, seemingly it gets better.
better under what? Like
Better in whatever evaluations they're doing. There's some
yeah,
papers
but
on
again,
it.
like I think like we also don't have like so many valuations method that makes sense nowadays. But whatever. Like I I I would agree with you that AI won't go away. I'd say sadly because like to my perspective, like I'm not sad by the fact that LLMs will still be there like in 10 years from now. My main argument is like I would rather prefer to see like shifts in how we produce models for like especially speaking for coding stuff. I would like to see like a direction in which we try to produce like smaller models to be able like to run them like on normal hardware without like the need of I don't know how many clusters of super huge NVIDIA's GPUs, which is why like to see the conversation like in some places to steer around at some point because again like yes AI won't go away but at the same time like it's very hard for me like to even like doing today like an investment over a company like Anthropic, even OpenAI, like even if it's like worth I don't know like how many billions of dollars, like I don't know in 5 years those company will still be there. Are they going to be profitable? Like I don't know. Like there's a bunch of questions, right? Like so, I'm not saying like the
I
tech.
also don't know. I don't know. I really don't know if they're going to stick around. I don't even know if the tech necessarily is worth too much money that seemingly the market sort of puts on it right now. And clearly we have a bunch of energy problems too, right? So there's like all of this I think is unsolved. But I also think like even if you take like one of the open weights models that exist today,
Mhm.
they're actually not that terrible. I mean, like I still can't run them without sort of renting some super like Hopper set up somewhere in some data center. And maybe even will take a couple of years to get to the point. And I think the models will have to get smaller. And I think there is some argument to be made that they can be smaller because you don't need all the world knowledge to run program. But I feel like we're at least on a trajectory where it still makes sense to me, right? I don't really like, to be fair, I think like most, like 90% or more of all of those AI startups are going to fail in one form or another because the market is way too frothy. Like that doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Mhm.
But the underlying reality to me is that even if we get stuck with transformers and even if we get stuck with what we have today, that shit's pretty amazing still. And I think like that, the quality of the models that we have right now, we can probably get away with a fraction of the parameters that we can actually run it on smaller hardware. And there is some indication that you can actually fine tune larger models. Sorry, fine tune is the wrong term here, but like there's still larger models for more narrow use cases on smaller models, and you still have decent quality, right? So I feel like it's at least lined up in a way where I can totally imagine that this will be okay. And that's why for me, like I'm looking at this mostly from like what can it technically do right now? Because I do think we're going to have these things self-running, or we're going to have them running on maybe alternative implementations, alternative trainings, and maybe that by selecting better codes rather than whatever has the highest entropy on GitHub will also lead to better results, hopefully. I mean, like, I don't think they're I don't think they're in a position where they think or where we have AGI or anything like that. I just
No,
like,
no,
my
that's
suspicion is that if you actually have higher quality code in there, you might actually get higher quality output. That's my assumption. Might be wrong, but I don't know if anyone's actually training it on that front.
I mean, it's also hard to like it's very hard for me to make like, a prediction. Like because and and this is probably why like the vast majority of people out there like see me as like a negative person in terms of AI, but I'm really not. Like the thing for me is like hard to make, to expect these things getting better, because like I don't know, like if we make a parallel to stable diffusion, like diffusion models for images, videos, like okay, videos has a lot more going on other than diffusion. But like, yes, like in there, like in the last, I don't know, like 4 to 5 years, yes, the quality improved. But like if you take that, like the last 2 years, didn't improve much. Like it feels more like we're already plateauing in some way, in the
It
curve.
also looks terrible. I mean, I think the problem is like I really never cared about
Yes,
the images because like the images to me is like sort of like
it really
it's
depends on what you
novel,
need to do.
it's novel and it's interesting, but I don't have a use for that. And all the uses I can imagine are terrible. Like I don't want to watch advertisements made from AI or watch cinema movies made with the help of diffusion models. Like I understand this is probably where we're going to go, and I will complain about it because I hate it. But I don't have the same reaction of text generation and code generation. Text generation a little bit. If someone sends me AI slop to my email, I will get angry. But but there is a
It,
responsible use of it, and I don't really see the responsible use of a diffusion AI, right? So I think like maybe diffusion for
I don't know, like
picture creation.
the Granian logo is made with AI. Like it's made with
My
Flux.
absurd logo is also made with AI.
You see, like I think there are cases like I'm not. I'm also like not against like the use of that like for advertisement. Like but I mean, like I think it really depends on what you think about like the business in general of advertisement. But yeah, like my point is like if that's the working example for like fundamentally like there are a lot of similarities like in how an LLM work and how a stable diffusion model work, at least mathematically speaking. So it's very hard for me to say yes, like in 2 years LLMs will be like amazing compared to today, right?
The thing is, like for me, the difference is that the LLM for code generation is already amazing today. So I don't need it to get better. I just need it to be running cheaper, faster, maybe have less shit in it. Like there's some shit in it I don't need.
Mhm.
But it's not like I need a breakthrough in computing technology or in model architecture or even like the data input necessarily. It feels to me it's already there. And I think that's the big difference because I don't like I feel like getting so much utility out of it. Like it's expensive right now for sure. Like I'm paying too much money for the inference, but I can imagine the money getting to a tenth or less of what it costs. And
How
well, I
though?
mean, in parts because like what you could theoretically right now run, I don't know, Kimi
Mhm.
or any of those models on I don't know, 300 billion parameters in a reasonable output, which is GPUs you can buy. It's not GPUs you can cheaply buy, but you can buy them. So if you just play this out for 4 years, we're going to be there where many more people are going to have a GPU that is capable of running models at that size. And I already know that that's good enough. Is it perfect? Probably not, because there will be better things coming down the line, and people will like invest more shit into it, and like eventually the market is going to like collapse. I think there is a bubble in it. But from if we ignore that, if we ignore the absurd interest of investors to get a slice of this already sort of overstuffed pie, I think the fundamentals are this is actually going to scale down so that I can realistically imagine this to be in my computer. And even my 5-year-old M1 Max thingy with the 64 gigabytes of RAM that it can utilize largely for a GPU, I can actually run some pretty good models. And it's like, am I doing it a lot? No. But every once in a while I do it just to see what's possible. And it's like, I can see it being not entirely unrealistic.
I don't know, because the amount of time I'm pissed off compared to the ones I'm amazed are probably and I guess like the vast majority, yeah, the number one cause of that, like for my workflows, is that like I daily work like on big repository, like big monorepos, like at Sentry we have this ops monorepo with everything like inside there, like and the amount of times like any LLM out there gets confused about like the context in which it operated, like the amount of times it just says nonsensical stuff about like Terraform modules, which is like a really good like way. Like, okay, so one another thing like about Terraform is like every single provider, like if you use like the GCP or the AWS provider, like the amount of changes they push out, they push a new version like once a week, right? Like that's the ratio.
This is why people should commit to backwards compatibility.
But again, like that would be something for me, like an AI would help, but they cannot because they get like so fucking confused about like that amount of changes and that amount of context that they just spit out nonsense like, hey, you used like a string here, but it's supposed to be an array of string. And you check the documentation of the Terraform module and no, that's not true. So like things like that, right? So I
I'll also
think
say
like,
that my experience with using Claude for Terraform was so bad that I moved to Pulumi.
you see, that's, but I mean, to my perspective, like as soon as Pulumi gets the same amount of usage of Terraform, we'll end up like with the same
Unless they learn and
situation,
not
right?
change
Because
everything all the time.
no, because I mean, like the providers are like APIs, like are the cloud providers API, like they can do whatever they want because like they're like that's the
But
reality,
maybe if
right?
people start complaining that the agents don't work if they change the stuff all the time, they will change. This is I think a question that I have in general is like, is like nobody gave a shit about humans, but with agents, I think people give a shit about.
Do we give a shit about machines? Like I don't know
I
if
feel like
that
we care
was.
about the machine a lot more than about the human, honestly,
I think it
because the
depends on
machine
the
is
context.
measurable.
But yeah, back to my point. Like, I guess, like, if something, like, at least for my use case, my daily use case, if something doesn't like fundamentally change in the way we treat like the latent space in LLMs, because like I think like 99% of my issues with AI are because of the context. And so, like, to my perspective, even if we go like to 10 billion tokens context, like, won't change anything. Like, I don't think like scaling the context like for my use cases is the answer to the problem. I think like the answer to the problem is, yeah, changing the architecture around how we loop into the latent space, right? And so, yeah, I guess like if some company at some point starts producing like a foundational model that works differently in terms of context and how like it treats tokens in inputs and outputs, yes, then probably at that point I will be like optimist in terms of like this thing getting better,
So for
at
you, it's
least
about
for
learning
some
and
stuff.
remembering, right? Like a lot of like that it doesn't start from zero and has a way to.
Yes, especially when I cannot control again, like, because if I use like Anthropic models or OpenAI models, I cannot control the learning, like in general, like, because they put out like a new version of the model, but it's still called like GPT-5 Codex or whatever. And maybe everything changed for like my use case, and I have
Like,
no
this
idea.
is a real problem. Like, even the move from I have this one Agentic loop, and like even the move from 4 to 4.5 changed things dramatically, and I was not able to evaluate because like I have no idea what changed. It's just like it's different now. So
Yes.
I share that problem. I share that opinion. I share that problem. I don't know what the solution is. I'm just maybe a little bit too optimistic that the open weights models are a counterbalance to sort of the OpenAI Anthropic duopoly, because we do have a bunch of Chinese models, and I think they are actually par. Um,
Yeah, but again, like, even if you like, if you look at the stable diffusion one, so like if you take Quen image, or if you take like Quen for like just text generation, like,
I don't think that they're better. I just think that they at least are in the point in so because they exist. If Anthropic and OpenAI decide to go even more nuclear on not sharing anything, then I feel like, okay, off to China I am. I don't really care. And you can see this now. Like, the a couple of American companies actually want to train their own models. They are just doing it on top of Chinese models. Like the Cursor model clearly is trained on one of those Chinese models. I think Windsurf did the same thing. So yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous that we have to sort of like go to the other side of the world and to another political system to get open weight models. But I will take it because nobody else has them. But it is, to me, it creates this counterpoint that at least for me makes it feel like there's a possibility that we are not like, if we didn't have the Chinese models, I would actually be much, much more negative on the whole thing, because then it
hmm
would imply to me that you can only run this as a very large corporation and there's no chance that this will trickle down.
hmm
It's just right now, the existence of those models implies that it's easy enough is hard to say, but like it's in the realm of possibility
hmm
that we will see more of those. And even sort of this absolute failure of your European company, this Mistral thingy, does create a model.
hmm
So like this, it is what it is. But but they're capable of producing something.
hmm
Is it the
hmm
most amazing? No, not at all. And I think they could do much better if they had a little bit more ambition. But they at least have a model,
hmm
and so it shows that there is like, this is not just Google runs the world. I think it's going to be there's going to be some competition.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I also plan to like give another try to Cursor as they release like version 2 with Composer and that kind of thing, to see, because again, like the like, I saw some videos like of people training it, and it's like at least like their model is very fast. So at least like that could, I don't know, like, change my perception probably. Like, okay, maybe I still have to do like 10 rerolls, but like the amount of time I need to wait is different. So maybe yes, I don't know, like in terms of perspective, again, I see some tiny things somewhere like that makes me wonder about the future. Like, I see some very little few things here and there. But yeah, I think like, to like, for me to actually say, okay, I can trust whatever, like I can trust in general what it spits out or what it gets from my thought. Yeah, I think it would be still hard for me to use. Like, at least again, to my like field scopes, like even on my open source project, like I think I could try to like do some like annoying stuff on Grania, like, but still feel
Try
risky.
some Rebo cases. They are fun. They're really fun. Or just see what it does if you just let it loose on an open source project. I did as a bunch of mini changes. Like, I just want to see how adventurous did it get, and it gets bloody adventurous. This is interesting.
I don't know, like the vast majority of things like I get annoyed on my project is like Windows related stuff, because I had like this terrible idea to support Windows, where I just could say like no. But anyways, like, and I
But you
tried
know what's
once, but
so fun thing? I had this situation very recently. I have a Windows computer, but like I don't want to boot for like one stupid bug fix.
mhm,
So one of the things that I did is like I told Claude to fix the problem. It knows it's on a Mac, and I told it, look, you can commit to a branch, you can push to GitHub, and then you can run the GH command to pull on the status report. And so it actually iterated while
mhm.
committing to GitHub and used the GitHub runner as a Windows machine. It was marvelous. It took it like 3 hours, but it was working. And I think it's like it's kind of fun.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah. I mean, I could try for that, like, but yeah,
it was nice
tiny use
talking,
case. Yes, absolutely.
but thanks.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice.